Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another video. Throughout the Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows, it's been very rare, but it has happened where two villainous or evil characters have met up with each other and have dueled. Now, villains is kind of ambiguous, right? You have your main villains and you have your side villains. I tried to only pick characters that were clearly opposing the protagonist or had recently only just switched up, and hopefully that makes sense with what I'm including on this list. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to find 10 duels where this phenomenon occurred. So without any further ado, let's go. Here are the top 10 villain versus villain duels in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope you enjoy. Number 10, I versus Queen. I was the final villain of Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns, and he made his debut duel against Queen, and this duel, although it was kind of fun to see I duel in human form, was really nothing to write home about. It was an incredibly quick duel. We didn't even see all of it, like Queen's turn was totally off screen, and this was really just a duel to showcase how brutal and talented I was as a duelist. He quickly wiped the floor with Queen. He put Queen into a state of comatose, where we really are not even sure what happened to her after this point. We have no idea if she ever even woke up. But this duel was all about establishing I. It did its job, but it definitely is not anything special, and I think it deservedly comes in at number 10. Number 9, Don Thousand versus Misael. Sure, at this point in the storyline, Misael had kind of switched sides, but he still was a Baryon, and the Baryons were against Yuma and Astral up until really that final duel between Yuma and Nash. Misael, after witnessing Kaito's moon death, decided to take on Don Thousand and try to get payback at Don Thousand for deceiving him and all the other Baryons. But little did he know that Don Thousand's powers would transcend that of dueling. He was able to change the text of a card that allowed him to defeat Misael in one quick, swift blow. I'm laughing because it's an absolutely ridiculous turn, but again, it's a very, very quick duel, and so I think comparatively to some of the other ones, it doesn't really have the substance, but it certainly stands out for that reason, and it's memorable for that reason. Number 8, Yugioh versus Yugioh. This was a really fun duel, and we knew something was going on with Swirly, and I don't think many of us expected that he was actually the 6th Goha sibling that was sealed away by the other Goha siblings using Monster Reborn. Well, Yugioh officially awakens and completely runs over Yugioh as soon as it happens. It's an awesome, awesome debut. The duel is a little lower on my list because I just feel like the debut of Yugioh and the transformation from Swirly is what makes this duel really cool, and I don't think the dueling action is like incredibly well, so I do have it a little higher than the bottom, but it still is towards the bottom for me for that reason. Number 7, Dark Signer Carly versus Divine. Now, prior to this, Divine literally killed Carly by blowing her off of like a 30-store building, and she fell to her death. As soon as she died, she was reborn a Dark Signer. She walked all the way back up the Arcadia headquarters, challenged Divine, and completely wiped the floor with Divine, and basically did to Divine what Divine did to her by forcing him, thanks to blowback from the duel, to fly off of the building. Somehow Divine survived, but this was a great cementing and turn character moment for Carly Carmine. I have it lower because I hated how the duel was interrupted with the Aki and Misty stuff and the fact that the building was collapsing, and so I felt that kind of broke up the pacing of the duel a little bit, but still, very, very cool moment for her. Number 6, Zone versus Aoria. I know at this point in the story, Aoria has had a change of heart, but it doesn't change the fact that he was one of the main villains up until this point. This duel always stands out for me because it's one of the few times that the Heart of the Cards moment actually failed. We see Heart of the Cards work out so much where a duelist draws what they need to. Aoria, under the pressure of Zone, talking about how hope is a false illusion, needs to draw a certain card. He's unable to do so, leading to his defeat and subsequent death on the hands of Zone, who used to be, of course, one of his best friends. It's a great duel, and that moment always stands out for me. Number 5, Vector versus Morag and Derb. This was like one of the first times where you really see the insanity of Vector unleashed. I mean, it was pretty obvious that Vector was a twisted character, seeing what he did to Yuma and a lot of the other characters, but I always feel like this is the duel where his insanity absolutely peaks and shines. What he does to Morag and Derb while forcing Nash to watch one of his best friends and his little sister basically get killed at his hands is absolutely terrifying. Some of the back and forth in this duel is actually really, really good, and it's one of those duels where you thought maybe Morag and Derb could actually pull it off because Vector was at a 2-to-1 disadvantage. Unfortunately for them, they're not able to do so. Vector gets the win, and we are not done with Vector duels in this video. Number 4, Yubel versus Aman. This was a great villain versus villain duel towards the end of Season 3 of GX, and it was another one that was kind of hard to predict. You didn't really know what direction they were going to go in. Was Aman actually going to be the one to take over Yubel's assumed role of final villain and rule over all of the dimensions? Remember, he had just unlocked the power of Exodia, and he just beat Edo and seemed like he could be unstoppable. Well, he was unstoppable until Yubel got their hands on him. Aman ends up suffering a defeat at the hands of Yubel. There are a lot of great symbolic moments in this duel, and Aman is, you know, just an asshole. And it was very fun to see him finally get his comeuppance in this duel. It was one of the rare times where I was actually rooting for the villain, that being Yubel, to win. Number 3, Yami Bakura versus Yami Marrick. I think this is one of the classic duels that you think of when you think villain versus villain. Yami Bakura really did not get many wins on the dueling field throughout his time in Duel Monsters, but he still was a pretty terrifying character every time he was on the screen. You know who was a little more terrifying, though? Yami Marrick with the power of the Winged Dragon of Ra. I love the dynamic of this duel, too, because you have Marrick, what Yami Marrick would always refer to as his weaker self, supporting Bakura, trying to will Bakura on to win the duel. I mean, when you just look at a pure evil perspective, I don't think it gets any more evil than these two characters. These are top 5 villains in the show, and you know, the more I think about it, maybe I have this one ranked honestly too low. I think 3rd is fitting because the duel action isn't anything crazy, but this is probably the most iconic and well-known duel on this list, and it certainly is one that I go back to and watch often, and I feel like this is the standard for villain versus villain duels in Yu-Gi-Oh! Number 2, Lightning versus Spectre. You know, it's hard, really, to put this any lower when you look at the dueling action of these characters. Both of these characters are, you know, bat-S insane, and to see what they did in this duel is something that I don't know if it will ever be duplicated. The back-to-back extra links, Spectre hitting a extra link full mode. I mean, this is peak link summoning, and I think it's one of the coolest, most memorable duels from Vrains for this reason. Spectre pulls off the extra link full mode, and you know what's crazier? He doesn't even win. Lightning somehow comes back, breaks his seemingly impenetrable board, and gets the win, defeating and thus killing Spectre. It is great when you can see two insane people fight, and I think that's encapsulated by these two choices, Bakura Marrick, Lightning Spectre. Number 1, I went in a slightly different direction. But before we get to number 1, I do have an honorable mention, and that is Revolver versus Lightning. It's one of my favorite duels from Vrains. I ultimately decided not to include that or Revolver versus Windy, because I felt at that point in the story, Revolver was no longer a villain. I know it might be hypocritical because I'm including Spectre, but Spectre to me was always way more insane and unhinged than Revolver. So that's kind of something I just wanted to mention as an honorable mention. Revolver versus Lightning's an incredible duel. I did not forget Revolver's duels with the Ignis. I just felt at that part of the story, he was too far removed from being a villain for me to include him, so that's why I didn't. Number 1, Vector versus Nash. I know some people might say, oh, come on, Nash isn't a villain, but he absolutely was. Nash certainly was a villain in the sense of opposing Yuma at that part in the story of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. I mean, the final fight had massive implications when Yuma took on Nash after the Dawn 1000 duel. So Nash certainly, I think, falls in that villain category during the Baryon arc, and seeing these two duel, while Nash maybe isn't at the same unhinged insanity evil level that a Lightning, Spectre, Bakura, and Marrick are at, Vector certainly was, and the historical implications that this duel had was incredible. These two went back so far into the past, and I feel like it's the only matchup on this list where it was almost like centuries in the making. And one of my favorite moments in all of Zexal is when Nash has to show every card he draws, and basically Vector has kind of locked him out from doing anything, and Nash somehow draws Rank Up Magic, the 7th one. The music, Vector's reaction to it is incredible. The duel from that point onwards that ensued would be amazing, and it was another one where we didn't know who was going to win. It was very plausible that Vector was going to win, and Yuma would have to be the one to stop Vector, but the fact that Nash is the one that puts an end to Vector's madness is so fitting, it's so bold, and I think it was a great decision to allow not your main protagonist to defeat one of the greatest threats in the show up until that point. Vector versus Nash, to me, is the best quality and characterization evil villain versus villain duel that we have ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! And guys, that wraps it up. Another top 10 list in the books. I really hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think of my list, and please let me know your own lists, and let me know if I maybe missed any duels that you would have put down below in the comments. I know the word villain is a little ambiguous, but again, we had to be a little ambiguous to even hit 10 entries here, because it's something that really doesn't happen often in Yu-Gi-Oh! Thank you guys all so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the comments, and I hope you have an amazing day. Take care, guys.